He wasn't supposed to make it through the night, not with 20 doctors standing around a bed that had already begun to feel like a goodbye, not with machines breathing in place of lungs and silence filling the spaces where certainty should have been. And yet somewhere beyond the glass doors, a dog refused to lie down. The room smells faintly of antiseptic and something colder, something like metal left out in winter rain, and the fluorescent lights hum with a tired persistence that mirrors the slow, uneven rhythm on the heart monitor beside Daniel Whitmore, a Royal Marines officer whose body now lies still beneath hospital sheets that are too clean for a man who has lived through dust, fire, and long nights under foreign skies, his skin pale against the white, his right arm resting at an angle that reveals the faded outline of a German shepherd inked into his flesh, the lines softened by time, but unmistakable. A mark of loyalty carved long before this room, long before this moment, long before anyone here began whispering about the word they have not yet said aloud. We're running out of options. One voice murmurs, low and careful, as if volume alone might tip the balance, as if speaking too loudly could somehow push him further away, and another voice answers with the quiet certainty of resignation. We've tested everything. And that is the truth that hangs heavier than any machine in the room. Because everything, in this place, is supposed to be enough. Every scan, every reading, every chart filled with numbers that now mean less than the silence between them. And yet Daniel's condition remains a question no one can answer, his body slipping, not dramatically, not violently, but quietly, like a tide withdrawing in the dark where no one is watching. Outside, beyond the thick glass and the closed doors, Rex sits on the cold hospital floor, his posture rigid, ears alert, eyes fixed on something no one else can see. A German shepherd trained for precision, for obedience, for reading the smallest signals in chaos, and now faced with a stillness that makes no sense to him, a stillness that does not match the man he knows, because Daniel Whitmore is not a man who fades, not a man who lies still without reason, not a man who would leave without a fight. And Rex knows this in the way animals know things without needing proof, without needing charts or confirmation or the quiet agreement of 20 professionals standing helplessly around a bed. A nurse passes by and glances at him briefly, offering a soft, sympathetic smile that doesn't reach her eyes, because in her mind, this is already over. This is a ritual now, not a rescue. And yet Rex does not move, does not lower his head, does not accept the unspoken conclusion that has settled into the walls like dust. Instead, he leans forward slightly, nose lifting, catching something faint beneath the sterile air, something that doesn't belong, something that doesn't fit, and his body tenses in response, a subtle shift, barely noticeable to anyone not looking directly at him, but loaded with intention. Inside, the machines continue their quiet work, each beep a fragile promise that could stop at any moment, and Daniel's chest rises and falls with mechanical assistance, a rhythm imposed rather than chosen, while his face remains calm, almost too calm, as if he has stepped somewhere beyond discomfort, beyond pain, into a place where the body no longer argues, where it simply waits. Time of death, pending, someone says under their breath, not as a declaration but as a preparation, a way of bracing for the inevitable. And the words linger in the air, unfinished, because no one has yet had the courage to complete them. Beyond the door, Rex stands now, his claws clicking softly against the polished floor, his gaze unwavering, fixed not on the people moving past him, not on the noise of the hospital, but on the room itself, as if something inside is calling to him in a language no one else can hear. And for a moment, just a moment, it feels as though the entire building pauses, as though the hum of the lights, the distant footsteps, the quiet conversations, all pull back to make space for something else, something smaller, quieter, but infinitely more certain, because sometimes the difference between life and death is not found in the noise of expertise or the weight of numbers. Sometimes it waits in the stillness, in the overlooked detail, in the place no one thinks to look. And as Rex takes a single step closer to the door, the faintest reflection of Daniel's unmoving hand catches in the glass, the ink of the dog on his arm barely visible beneath the hospital light, a mark of loyalty that has outlived every battlefield, every mission, every narrow escape, and now rests there, silent, unnoticed, as 20 doctors search everywhere except the one place that might still matter, and outside. The dog who once followed every command now stands on the edge of disobedience, because something is wrong, something is missing, and whatever at the corridor does not change, but something in it tightens, as if the air itself has begun to listen, and inside the room the quiet becomes heavier, pressing down on every surface, every breath, every thought that no one dares to say aloud. While Daniel Whitmore remains suspended between something that looks like sleep and something that feels like departure, his chest rising with the measured rhythm of the ventilator, his skin cool beneath the sterile glow, and the faint line of that old tattoo on his right arm catching the light again, unnoticed, unimportant, just another detail in a room full of details that have already been dismissed. Neurological response is still minimal. A doctor says, voice calm but hollow, the kind of calm that comes from repetition rather than confidence, and another replies with a slow nod, eyes fixed on a monitor that offers numbers but no answers, because everything that should explain this does not. Every scan, every chart, every test returning with the same quiet refusal to reveal what is wrong. And that absence of explanation begins to feel more dangerous than any diagnosis could have been. Beyond the glass, Rex shifts his weight again, the movement subtle but deliberate, his paws adjusting on the polished floor as he leans closer, nose lifting slightly, drawing in the scent that leaks through the edges of the sealed room, faint and filtered, but still there, something beneath the antiseptic, something buried under layers of human control, and his ears tilt forward, catching not just sound but silence, the kind of silence that does not belong, because he has known Daniel in chaos, in noise, in the sharp edge of danger, and this stillness feels wrong in a way he cannot ignore. A young nurse passes him, her shoes whispering against the floor, and she pauses for a fraction of a second, glancing down at him, noticing the way he does not sit like other dogs, does not rest, does not accept. And there is a question in her eyes that she does not voice. Not yet. Because this is a hospital and questions are supposed to follow procedure, not instinct, and instinct has no place in rooms like these, or at least that is what they tell themselves. Inside, one of the doctors exhales slowly and steps back from the bed, rubbing his temple as if trying to force clarity through fatigue. We have ruled out infection, trauma, neurological collapse, he says, listing them like items on a checklist that should have led somewhere by now. And yet the list only grows longer while the answers remain out of reach. And another doctor, older, more reserved, studies Daniel for a moment longer before speaking quietly. Sometimes the body shuts down in ways we do not fully understand. And the sentence hangs there, incomplete, because what it really means is that they are running out of time, and no one wants to be the one to say it first. Outside, Rex steps closer to the door, his nose now almost touching the glass, his breath leaving a faint fog that fades as quickly as it appears, and for a moment he stands completely still, as if aligning himself with something unseen, something that does not exist in the language of machines or medicine. And then, slowly, his head tilts, just slightly, the way it does when a sound catches his attention. Except there is no sound here, nothing audible, nothing measurable, and yet his body reacts as if there is, as if something inside that room is calling to him in a way that bypasses everything else. The nurse returns, this time slower, her gaze lingering longer on the dog, noticing the tension in his stance, the unwavering focus, and something about it unsettles her, not in a frightening way, but in a way that suggests she might be missing something, something small, something easy to overlook, and she glances through the glass into the room, her eyes following the line of Rex's gaze without fully realizing it, tracing it past the bed, past the monitors, until it settles, almost accidentally, on Daniel's right arm. Inside, the conversation continues, quieter now, more fragmented, as if each word carries weight that no one wants to hold. And one of the doctors checks the time, a simple gesture that feels heavier than it should, because time here is no longer neutral. It is moving in one direction only, and everyone knows it. Rex lets out a low, almost inaudible sound, not a bark, not a whine, but something in between, something restrained, and his paw lifts slightly from the floor before settling back down, as if he is holding himself back from doing something he cannot quite explain. And the nurse notices that too, the hesitation, the intent, and now the question in her mind grows louder. Pressing against the boundaries of what she has been trained to trust, she steps closer to the glass, her reflection merging with the room beyond, and she studies Daniel more carefully, not as a case, not as a chart, but as a person. And for the first time since her shift began, she allows herself to look without expectation, without assumption, just observation. And it is in that moment, quiet and almost accidental, that the faint discoloration near the edge of the tattoo becomes just slightly more visible, not enough to alarm, not enough to confirm anything, but enough to exist, enough to be real. Behind her, footsteps approach, another member of staff moving with purpose, ready to continue the routine that has so far led nowhere. And the rhythm of the hospital resumes its steady pace, efficient, controlled, predictable. But Rex does not move, does not look away, because whatever he senses has not changed. Whatever he feels is still there, waiting, overlooked. And as the nurse hesitates for just 1 second longer, caught between protocol and instinct, the quiet tension in the corridor deepens, as if something fragile is about to shift, something small enough to be missed, but powerful enough to change everything. The moment does not arrive with noise but with hesitation, a pause that stretches just long enough to be noticed by the one person who is no longer entirely certain that everything here is under control. And Emily Clark feels it before she understands it, a quiet resistance inside her chest as she stands between the corridor and the room, her eyes drifting once more to Daniel Whitmore's arm, to that faint distortion in color that should mean nothing and yet refuses to disappear now that she has seen it. Because once something becomes visible, it rarely returns to being invisible, and her training tells her to move on, to trust the layers of expertise that have already passed over this body. But something older, something simpler, tells her to look again. Inside, the doctors begin to shift positions, one of them adjusting the drip with careful precision, while another reviews the chart as though the answer might have appeared in the margins since the last time he looked. And their movements are efficient, practiced, almost mechanical, the choreography of a system that works because it follows rules. And yet those same rules now form a boundary that no one has crossed. Not yet. Not until Emily takes a single step forward and speaks, her voice quieter than she expects, but steady enough to be heard. "Excuse me. Has anyone checked this area closely?" And for a moment the room does not react. Not because they have not heard her, but because the question itself feels misplaced. A deviation from the sequence they trust. One of the doctors glances up, mild surprise crossing his face before it settles into polite dismissal. "We have conducted a full examination," he replies, not unkindly, simply certain, and Emily nods as if she accepts this. But her gaze does not leave Daniel's arm, does not release the small detail that continues to insist on being seen, and Rex, beyond the glass, shifts again, his body aligning with the tension in the room as though he can feel the shift in her, the decision forming, the thin line between following protocol and following instinct. Emily steps closer to the bed now, the soft sound of her shoes against the floor marking each movement with quiet intention, and she reaches out, hesitating only briefly before gently turning Daniel's arm slightly to catch the light at a different angle. And there it is again, that subtle change, a faint swelling, a slight darkening near the edge of the tattoo. Nothing dramatic, nothing urgent at first glance, but not nothing either, and she leans in closer, her brow tightening as she studies it with a focus that cuts through the noise of the room. "This area, it looks irritated," she says, more to herself than to anyone else. And one of the doctors steps nearer, curiosity replacing dismissal as he follows her line of sight, his expression shifting almost imperceptibly as he sees what she sees, because now that it has been pointed out, it cannot be unseen, and he reaches out, pressing lightly against the skin, observing the response, the subtle resistance, the warmth that should not be there in a body that is otherwise cooling. "When was this tattoo done?" he asks, and the question feels like the first real question anyone has asked in hours, maybe longer, and no one answers immediately because it has not seemed relevant until now. Another doctor moves closer, his earlier confidence softening into concentration, and he studies the area with growing interest. "There could be an underlying infection," he murmurs, the words careful, measured. as if testing themselves before being fully spoken, and suddenly the room changes, not dramatically, but enough, the air shifting from resignation to possibility, from ending to uncertainty, and uncertainty, in this place, is something like hope. Outside, Rex's ears lift higher, his posture sharpening as if he recognizes the shift before anyone else fully understands it. His tail still, his entire body focused on the room beyond the glass. And for the first time since he arrived, he lets out a soft, controlled sound. Not a demand, not a cry, but something closer to acknowledgement, as though a message has finally been heard. Inside, instructions begin to form, quiet but urgent. Run a targeted blood panel. One doctor says, already reaching for the chart. Check for atypical bacterial markers. Another adds, and the rhythm of the room changes. No longer slow and resigned, but precise and deliberate. Each movement carrying a weight that had been missing before, and Emily steps back slightly, not out of retreat, but to give space to what she has set in motion, her eyes still on Daniel's arm, still on that small detail that refused to be ignored. The machines continue their steady work, unchanged in sound but different now in meaning, because they are no longer marking time toward an end. They are holding space for something that might still turn, and Daniel remains still, his face unchanged, his body quiet, but the story around him has shifted, the direction no longer fixed. One of the doctors glances briefly toward the glass, noticing the dog for the first time not as a presence, but as something else. Something that has been part of this moment from the beginning, and he does not say it out loud, does not give voice to the thought forming in his mind, but it lingers there. Nonetheless, quiet and undeniable. And in the corridor, Rex lowers himself slowly to the floor, not in defeat, not in rest, but in a kind of watchful patience, as if he understands that whatever comes next will take time, and that time, for now time changes its weight inside the room. No longer slipping quietly toward an ending but stretching, resisting, holding itself open as if waiting for permission to turn. And the monitors that once sounded like a countdown now begin to feel like a fragile bridge, something that might carry a man back if given the chance, while the doctors move with a renewed precision that is careful not to become hope too quickly, because hope in this place must be earned, must be proven, must survive scrutiny before it is allowed to exist. Samples are drawn with steady hands, labeled, passed on, each small action part of a chain that now has direction. And Emily Clark stands just beyond the immediate circle, watching not with relief, but with a quiet vigilance, as though she understands that seeing something is only the beginning, that it must still be followed, confirmed, believed, and acted upon. The faint discoloration on Daniel Whitmore's arm remains where it was, unchanged in appearance yet entirely transformed in meaning, no longer a detail but a question, and questions have a way of opening doors that were not there before. Outside, Rex remains low to the ground, his body still but not relaxed, every line of him held in a kind of silent readiness, his gaze fixed on the same place, the same arm, as if the glass between them does not exist, as if distance is something that applies only to those who rely on sight alone. The corridor hums softly. With distant movement, footsteps, muted voices, the quiet machinery of a hospital carrying on its endless work. But here, near this door, something has shifted into a slower, deeper rhythm, one that does not belong entirely to routine. Minutes pass, though they feel longer, stretched by anticipation, and then the first result returns, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a change in tone. A slight tightening in the voice of the doctor reading it. There are elevated markers, he says, eyes narrowing as he scans the data again, confirming what he sees, and another doctor steps closer, reading over his shoulder, the silence between them filled with a growing recognition that this is not a coincidence, not an anomaly to be dismissed, but a path that has been waiting to be followed. Run a deeper analysis. Comes the reply, calm but urgent now. And the words carry weight, because they acknowledge what was missed, what lay hidden beneath assumptions and standard procedures, and as more data begins to form, the outline of something clearer emerges, not fully understood yet, but real enough to act upon. Inside Daniel's body, unseen by all but suggested by the numbers, something foreign has been working quietly, slowly, slipping past detection, spreading in a way that does not announce itself, and it is this quietness that made it dangerous, that allowed it to exist beneath the threshold of suspicion. And now, finally, it has been named, not fully, but enough. This could explain the neurological suppression, one doctor says, his voice no longer uncertain, but measured with purpose, and another nods, already considering the next step. If it is what we think it is, we still have a window, and that word, window, lands differently in the room, because it implies possibility, time, a chance that had not existed moments before. Emily exhales slowly, not realizing she has been holding her breath, her eyes flicking once more to the arm, to the tattoo that now feels less like ink and more like a message that had waited to be read, and she thinks, briefly, of the dog outside, of the way he had refused to look anywhere else, and she does not say it, does not need to, because the truth of it exists without explanation. The plan begins to form with quiet urgency, not rushed, not chaotic, but precise, each instruction given with clarity, each movement aligned with a purpose that has finally taken shape. And as preparations begin, the room shifts fully from observation to action, from watching to intervening. Outside, the door opens briefly as a nurse passes through, and for a moment the barrier between Rex and Daniel thins, just enough for scent to escape more clearly. Just enough for confirmation to reach the dog who has been waiting, and Rex rises slowly, his body unfolding from stillness into motion, stepping closer to the threshold but not crossing it, because he does not need to, he already knows. His ears remain forward, his eyes steady, and there is no excitement in him, no sudden burst of energy, only a quiet certainty, the kind that comes when something out of place begins to return to where it belongs. Inside, Daniel remains unmoving, his face unchanged, his body still dependent on the machines that hold him in this fragile space. But around him everything is different now, the air charged with intention, the silence no longer empty, but filled with focus. And somewhere beneath the surface, beneath the stillness that defines him in this moment, something has begun to resist, to push back against whatever has been pulling him away. The doctors do not see that part, not directly, but they feel it in the shift of the room, in the way uncertainty has given way to direction. And as the final preparations are made, as the plan becomes action, as time once again begins to move forward instead of closing in, there is a quiet understanding that settles over those present, unspoken but shared, that this moment, this fragile turning point, did not begin with them, did not come from the machines or the charts or the long list of tests, but from something smaller, something overlooked, something that waited patiently until someone, or something, refused to look away. The preparation does not feel like urgency in the way people expect. There is no rush of panic, no raised voices, only a tightening of focus that draws every movement into a single quiet purpose. And the room becomes smaller in that sense, not in space but in attention, as if everything that does not matter has been gently pushed aside, leaving only Daniel Whitmore, the faint discoloration on his arm, and the narrow window that has been offered back to him. Instruments are arranged with care, not haste, hands moving with the kind of precision that comes from years of repetition. Yet beneath that discipline there is something else now, something more fragile, the awareness that this moment exists because something almost invisible was finally seen, and that awareness carries a weight that no one speaks aloud. Emily stands near the foot of the bed, her posture still, her eyes following the sequence of actions as if committing them to memory, not because she needs to, but because this is the point where observation becomes consequence, where a small decision begins to shape a life again, and she feels it in the quiet rhythm of her breathing, in the way the room seems to hold itself steady. Outside, Rex remains by the door, but he is no longer completely still, his head turning slightly as staff move past, his ears adjusting to each sound, not distracted, only aware, as if he is tracking the movement of something unfolding beyond his sight. And when the door opens again, briefly, to allow another member of staff through, he steps closer without hesitation, his nose lifting, drawing in the sharper scent that now escapes the room. And there is recognition in that breath, a confirmation that what he sensed before has not only been acknowledged, but is being confronted. Inside, the doctors begin the intervention with a calm that borders on reverence. not for the procedure itself, but for the possibility it represents, and each step is deliberate, measured, guided not by urgency alone but by precision, because this is not a battle of force, it is a correction, a quiet undoing of something that should never have taken hold, and the monitors continue their steady sound, unchanged in tone but altered in meaning, no longer marking decline but holding a line, giving time the chance to work alongside them. One of the doctors glances again at the data as it updates, subtle shifts appearing, not dramatic, not immediate, but present, and he nods once. A small gesture that carries more weight than any spoken reassurance, because it confirms that the path they are following is not imagined, that the direction is real. Emily notices the change not in the numbers, which remain abstract to her in this moment, but in the posture of the people around her, in the way tension shifts from uncertainty to concentration, and she allows herself a quiet exhale, not relief, not yet, but something close to it, a recognition that the story has not ended where it was expected to. Outside, Rex lowers himself again, but this time it is different, not the rigid stillness of waiting, but a controlled rest, his body aligned with the floor, his head still raised, eyes fixed, as if he understands that whatever comes next will not be immediate, that patience is now required. And patience is something he has learned in places far less forgiving than this. Corridor, minutes pass, measured not by the clock but by the subtle changes within the room, by the way voices remain low but steady, by the way hands continue their work without hesitation, and then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifts, not in a dramatic movement, not in a sudden change, but in the smallest of signs, a slight variation in the rhythm displayed on the monitor, a pattern that adjusts just enough to draw attention, and one of the doctors leans in closer, eyes narrowing. As he studies it, confirming that what he sees is not an error, not a fluctuation, but a response. There, he says quietly, and the word is not loud, not triumphant, but it carries through the room with a clarity that changes everything, because it marks the first undeniable sign that Daniel is no longer only being held, he is beginning to return. Emily feels it before she fully understands it, the shift in the air, the subtle release of tension that has been held for too long, and she looks again at Daniel's face, searching for something more, something visible, but his features remain still, unchanged, and yet the room knows, even without seeing, that something has begun beneath the surface. Outside, Rex lifts his head higher, his ears sharpening, his body tensing not in alarm but in recognition, as if a distant signal has reached him, faint but unmistakable, and he rises to his feet in a smooth, controlled motion, stepping closer to the door once more, his gaze unwavering. Inside, the doctors continue, not stopping, not slowing, because a response is not a conclusion, it is a beginning, and beginnings require care, require continuation, require belief that what has started can be carried forward, and as they work, the room holds that belief quietly, without declaration, without celebration, because it is still fragile, still forming, still dependent on what comes next. Emily glances once more at the tattoo on Daniel's arm, at the place where this turning began, and she does not see it the same way now, not as ink, not as a detail, but as a point of connection, a place where something hidden revealed itself through the insistence of a creature that could not explain what it knew. And she realizes, without needing to say it, that sometimes the smallest signals carry the greatest weight, not because they are obvious, but because they are the ones that refuse to be ignored. And in the quiet space between one heartbeat and the next, as the machines continue their steady rhythm and the room moves forward with careful intention, there is a sense, subtle but undeniable, that something has been given back, not fully, not completely, but enough to matter, enough to continue, enough for a man who was slipping away to find, once again, a reason to stay. The change does not arrive all at once. It comes in layers, quiet and deliberate, like light returning to a room before anyone notices the sun has risen, and inside the intensive care unit the rhythm of the machines begins to carry a different weight, no longer the fragile imitation of life, but something closer to partnership, as if the body beneath the sheets has begun to meet the machines halfway, responding in small, measured ways that only those watching closely can see, and the doctors do watch closely now. Every line, every number, every subtle shift examined with a focus that has replaced the earlier uncertainty, because uncertainty has given way to direction, and direction, even when fragile, is enough to hold on to. Daniel Whitmore remained still, his face calm, his breathing assisted, his presence suspended between absence and return, yet beneath that stillness something is changing, something that does not announce itself with movement or sound, but with resistance, a quiet refusal to continue fading. And the signs are there for those who know how to read them, the slight stabilization in his readings, the gradual correction of what had begun to slip, each detail small on its own, but undeniable together. Emily Clark stands just beyond the immediate circle again, her hands loosely clasped, her posture composed, yet her attention never wavers, following each moment as if it matters, because it does, because she understands now that what appears insignificant can hold the weight of everything. And her gaze drifts once more to the tattoo on Daniel's arm, the ink that has become more than memory, more than identity. Now a marker of the moment everything began to turn. Outside, Rex does not move away from the door, his body aligned with it as though anchored by something deeper than habit, his ears shifting with every sound that escapes the room, his eyes steady and alert, and when footsteps pass behind him or voices echo down the corridor, he does not react, not because he cannot hear them, but because they do not matter, not compared to what lies beyond the glass, not compared to the quiet signal he felt and followed without hesitation. Time continues, measured not by clocks but by change, and within the room the pace remains controlled, careful, deliberate, as further treatment is administered, adjustments made with precision, each action building upon the last, not rushing, never rushing, because what is being restored cannot be forced, it must be guided, supported, allowed to find its way back at its own pace. One of the doctors leans closer to the monitor, studying the pattern as it shifts again, slightly stronger now, slightly more consistent, and he nods once, a gesture that carries quiet confirmation. He is responding, he says, and though the words are simple, they settle into the room with a depth that no one interrupts, because they mark a threshold that has been crossed, a line that has been stepped back from. Emily exhales slowly, feeling the tension in her chest ease just enough to allow breath to return fully, and she glances toward the door, toward the place where Rex waits, and for a moment she wonders if he knows, if he can feel what has changed inside, and as if in answer, the dog lifts his head slightly, his posture sharpening, his body attuned to something that does not require explanation, something that exists beyond the boundaries of human understanding. Inside, Daniel's hand remains still against the sheet, fingers relaxed, unmoving, yet the stillness feels different now, no longer empty, but holding something beneath it, something waiting, and the doctors continue their work without pause, because a response is not a conclusion, it is an invitation, a chance that must be followed carefully, protected, given space to grow. The air in the room feels warmer somehow, though nothing has changed in temperature, and the light remains the same, pale and constant. Yet the atmosphere carries a different quality, something softer, something that does not belong to machines or medicine, but to the quiet presence of possibility. Outside, Rex shifts his weight once more, stepping closer to the glass, his nose almost touching it again, his breath leaving a faint mark that fades as quickly as it appears, and he watches, unwavering, patient, as if he has always known that this moment would come, not because he understands the process, but because he trusts the bond that has carried him and the man inside through places far more uncertain than this. Minutes pass, then more, and the pattern continues, small improvements, subtle changes, each one building upon the last. And though no one speaks of certainty, no one declares victory, the room no longer feels like a place where endings are prepared, but one where something is being rebuilt, quietly, carefully, with respect for how close it came to being lost. Emily steps slightly closer again, her gaze softening as she looks at Daniel, no longer as a patient, defined by charts and results, but as a man returning from somewhere distant, guided not only by skill and knowledge, but by something that cannot be measured, something that revealed itself through a dog who refused to look away, And in that quiet space, where machines hum and footsteps fade and voices remain low, there is a sense that what is happening here is not dramatic, not loud, not something that demands attention, but something far more powerful, something that unfolds in silence, where the smallest act of attention becomes the turning point, and where a life, once slipping beyond reach, begins, slowly and steadily, to find its way back. There is a moment, subtle and easily missed, when effort begins to give way to response, when what has been done for a body is finally met by what the body chooses to do for itself, and inside the room that moment arrives without announcement, without sound, carried instead in the quiet adjustment of rhythm, in the way the monitor's pattern steadies not because it is held there, but because it is sustained from within, and the doctors notice it not as a miracle, not yet, but as confirmation, that the path they have taken is holding, that the direction has meaning beyond hope. Daniel Whitmore lies as he has lain for hours, unmoving, silent, his face unchanged beneath the soft hospital light. Yet something beneath that stillness continues to gather strength, small, measured, patient, as if returning requires not force but permission, and permission is being granted one breath at a time. Emily Clark stands closer now than before, no longer at the edge of the room, but within it, part of the quiet circle that surrounds the bed, her eyes moving between the monitors and Daniel himself, not searching for a dramatic sign, not expecting a sudden change, but attentive to the smallest details, the kind that once went unnoticed and now feel essential. And she cannot help but glance again at the tattoo on his arm, the place where the first question began, the place that shifted everything. And it no longer looks like a detail at all. It looks like a beginning. Outside, Rex rises slowly, as if responding to something that has no sound, his body aligning with a shift he does not need explained, his paws carrying him closer to the glass once more, his posture alert but calm. And he watches with the same unwavering focus that brought him here. The same quiet insistence that refused to accept what others had already begun to believe. The corridor continues its distant rhythm, footsteps passing, voices low. The ordinary movement of a place that does not stop for any single story. And yet here, in this small space between one door and the next, time feels different, stretched and held in a way that allows something fragile to continue forming. Inside, one of the doctors leans in again, his attention fixed on the subtle interplay between numbers and reality, and he speaks quietly, almost to himself. It is stabilizing further, and the words are not dramatic. They do not rise, they do not call for attention, but they settle into the room with a weight that changes how everything is perceived, because stabilizing is no longer a possibility. It is a process already underway. Another doctor nods, adjusting a setting with careful precision, not to force, but to support what is already happening, and the room moves in quiet agreement, each action aligned with the same purpose, the same understanding that what is unfolding must be guided, not rushed. Emily steps closer still, drawn not by urgency, but by presence, and she looks at Daniel's hand, resting where it has always rested, fingers relaxed against the sheet. And for a moment nothing changes, nothing moves, and then, so slight it could be mistaken for imagination, there is a shift, a tension where there was none, a faint tightening that passes through the smallest part of his hand, and she stills, her breath catching not in alarm but in recognition, because she knows the difference between stillness and the beginning of movement. She does not speak immediately, does not break the moment with certainty, but one of the doctors notices too, his eyes narrowing as he focuses, watching, waiting, and there it is again, not a movement, not yet, but a response, subtle and undeniable. And he exhales slowly, the kind of breath that carries both relief and restraint. There is motor activity, he says, his voice steady, and the room absorbs it without reaction, without celebration, because they all understand how fragile this is, how easily it could be lost if held too tightly. Outside, Rex lets out a soft sound, low and controlled, not a bark, not a call, but something closer to acknowledgement, as if he has felt the same shift through a bond that does not rely on sight or sound. And he stands there, steady, patient, as though he has always known that this moment would come, not when, not how, but that it would, Because the connection he carries does not measure time the way humans do. It simply endures. Inside, Daniel remains still once more, the brief signal fading back into quiet. But it is no longer the same quiet. It is no longer empty. It holds within it the memory of response, the promise of continuation. And the doctors continue their work with renewed precision, not because they need to change course, but because they now have confirmation that the course is correct. Emily steps back slightly, her gaze lingering on Daniel, her expression softening in a way she does not fully notice. And she realizes that this is what it means for a life to return, not in sudden, dramatic moments, but in fragments, in small, almost invisible signs that build upon each other until they can no longer be ignored. The room settles into this new understanding, this quiet agreement that something has shifted beyond doubt, and as the machines continue their steady rhythm and the light remains unchanged, there is a presence that fills the space, something that does not belong to medicine alone, something that exists in the connection between a man and the dog waiting just beyond the glass, something that began with a refusal to look away and now continues with a life finding its way back, one small signal at a time. The room does not celebrate the change. It absorbs it, holds it carefully as if even acknowledgement might disturb what is still fragile. And yet beneath that restraint there is a quiet shift that no one can deny. Because once a body begins to respond, it cannot return to being only stillness. And Daniel Whitmore is no longer entirely absent, no longer suspended in that uncertain space where nothing answers back. He is present now in fragments, in signals so small they would once have been dismissed, but now they are watched with a kind of reverence that belongs only to moments that almost never happen twice. The monitors continue their steady rhythm, but there is a strength in the pattern now, a consistency that was not there before, and the doctors move with a calm precision that has changed in tone, no longer searching for what is wrong, but supporting what has begun to correct itself, adjusting, guiding, allowing the process to continue without interruption. Emily Clark remains close, her attention fixed not on the machines but on Daniel himself, on the subtle interplay between stillness and return, and she notices the way his breathing, though still assisted, seems less dependent, less forced, as if somewhere beneath the surface his body is remembering something it had nearly forgotten, something instinctive, something essential. Outside, Rex stands at the glass once more, his posture tall, his body aligned with the space beyond the door, and he does not move, does not shift, because he does not need to. The change has reached him already, not through sight or sound, but through that quiet connection that has guided him from the beginning, and his eyes remain fixed, unwavering, as if he is holding the moment steady simply by refusing to let it pass unnoticed. Inside, the doctors begin to reduce the level of support in small, careful increments, testing, observing, allowing Daniel's body to meet them halfway, and each adjustment is followed by a pause, a moment of waiting, of watching, of listening for the response that will determine the next step. And the response comes, not dramatically, not suddenly, but steadily, consistently, enough to continue, enough to move forward. One of the doctors glances at the others, a brief exchange of understanding passing between them, and though no one speaks it aloud, the meaning is clear. This is no longer a question of whether he will respond, but how far that response will carry. Emily's gaze drifts once more to Daniel's hand, resting against the sheet, and she watches it with quiet focus, not expecting, not demanding, simply present. And for a moment nothing happens, the stillness returning, the room holding its breath without realizing it. And then, slowly, deliberately, one finger shifts, just enough to break the pattern of stillness, just enough to confirm what they have all begun to believe. And this time there is no doubt, no hesitation. The movement is real, controlled, chosen. A doctor steps closer, his voice low but certain. "Daniel, if you can hear me, try to move your hand again." And the words settle into the space around the bed, gentle, unforced, and for a moment nothing changes, the silence stretching, the room waiting, and then the finger moves again, slightly stronger, slightly clearer, and the shift is complete, not because he is fully awake, not because he has returned entirely, but because he has crossed the line that separates absence from presence. Outside, Rex exhales softly, a sound that carries through the quiet corridor, and he lowers his head just slightly, not in exhaustion, not in relief, but in something deeper, something like recognition, as if the signal he has been holding onto has finally been answered. Inside, the doctors continue with care, not rushing the moment, not overwhelming it, because they understand that this is only the beginning. That recovery is not a single event, but a process that unfolds over time. And time, for now, has been given back. Emily steps back slightly, allowing the space to adjust, her eyes still on Daniel, and she feels something settle within her, not triumph, not pride, but a quiet understanding of what has happened here, of how close it came to being missed, and how something so small became the turning point. The light in the room remains soft, unchanged, the hum of the machine steady, the atmosphere calm, and yet everything is different now, because a man who was slipping away has found his way back to the edge of presence, guided not only by knowledge and skill, but by a bond that refused to be ignored. Outside, Rex remains where he is, patient, watchful. His presence as steady as it has always been, and he does not move away, not yet, because the story is not finished, because the man inside is still returning, and he will be there, just beyond the glass, until that return is complete, until the silence is fully replaced by something stronger, something certain, something alive. The room holds the moment the way a tide holds before it turns, not rushing forward, not pulling back, but suspended in that fragile balance where everything that follows depends on what happens next, and Daniel Whitmore lies within that balance, no longer lost to silence, no longer unreachable, but not yet fully returned, his presence marked now by the smallest acts of will, the faint movements that carry more weight than any words spoken in the room, and the doctors remain close, their attention sharpened, their movements careful, because they understand that this is where mistakes are made, not in the chaos of failure, but in the quiet of recovery when something delicate is mistaken for something certain. The monitors continue their steady rhythm, each line now carrying a story that is slowly rewriting itself, each signal confirming that the body beneath the sheets is no longer only being supported. It is participating, responding, remembering how to exist beyond assistance. And that process, though quiet, is undeniable. Emily Clark stands at the side of the bed, her presence steady, her gaze fixed on Daniel's face now rather than his hand, watching for something deeper, something that will move beyond reflex and into awareness, and she does not rush the moment, does not expect it to arrive on command, because she has already learned that the most important things in this room do not respond to urgency. They respond to patience. Outside, Rex remains where he has always been, his body aligned with the door, his posture calm but unwavering, and there is a stillness in him that mirrors the stillness inside, not empty, but full, as if he is holding a place for something that has not yet fully arrived. And when a nurse passes by, he does not shift, does not break his focus, because nothing in the corridor matters compared to what is unfolding beyond the glass. Inside, one of the doctors leans closer. Again, his voice low, measured. "Daniel, if you can hear me, try to open your eyes." And the words settle into the space gently, without force, without expectation, and for a moment nothing changes, the silence stretching, the room waiting in that same suspended balance. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, there is a shift, not in movement, not yet, but in tension, a subtle change around Daniel's eyes. The faintest tightening, as if something beneath the surface has heard, has registered, has begun to respond. Emily's breath catches, not sharply, but in a controlled pause, her focus narrowing as she watches, and the doctor remains still, giving space, allowing the moment to unfold without interruption, and then it happens, small, fragile, but real. Daniel's eyelids flicker, once, then again, not opening fully, not yet, but moving with intent, and the room changes in that instant, not with sound, not with celebration, but with a quiet recognition that something has crossed. Another threshold, something that cannot be undone. Outside, Rex lifts his head slightly higher, his ears forward, his body responding to something he cannot see, and he steps closer to the glass, his nose almost touching it, his breath leaving a faint mark that fades as quickly as it appears, and he watches, unwavering, as if he knows that the man inside is finding his way back, step by step, signal by signal. Inside, the doctor speaks again, softer this time. That is good, Daniel, stay with us. And the words are not commands. They are invitations, gentle and steady, and Daniel's eyelids move again, this time lingering slightly longer before settling back, as if the effort itself requires more than his body can yet sustain, and that is understood, accepted, because this is not a moment of completion, it is a moment of beginning. Emily feels the shift settle deeper now, no longer fragile in the same way, still delicate, still requiring care, but grounded in something real, something that has already happened and cannot be taken back, and she glances briefly toward the door, toward Rex. And for a moment she allows herself to acknowledge what she has known quietly since the beginning. That this turning point did not belong entirely to medicine, that it began with something else, something instinctive, something that refused to accept what logic had already decided. The doctors continue their careful adjustments, reducing support where it is no longer needed, observing how Daniel's body responds, allowing him to take more of the work back for himself, and each small success builds upon the last. Not dramatically, not visibly to anyone outside this room, but with a steady progression that speaks of recovery, of return. The light remains soft, the air steady, the hum of the machines constant, and yet everything within the space has changed, because a man who was once slipping beyond reach has begun to respond to the world again, not fully, not completely, but enough to be here, enough to be seen, enough to be called back. Outside, Rex lowers himself slowly to the floor once more, his body settling into a position of quiet watchfulness, his head still raised, his eyes still fixed on the room, and there is no urgency in him now, no tension, only a steady presence, as if he understands that the hardest part has passed, that what remains is time, patience, and the continuation of something that has already begun. And inside, as Daniel's eyelids rest once more, not in absence but in recovery, the room holds that understanding in silence, not needing to speak it, not needing to celebrate it, because some moments are too quiet for words, and some returns are too fragile for noise. And in that silence, something real continues to grow, something that began with a single unnoticed detail and now carries the weight of a life finding its way back. The room no longer waits for proof that he is returning. It begins to work with the quiet certainty that he already is, and the difference is subtle but unmistakable, carried not in loud declarations, but in the way every movement now supports something living rather than preserving something fading. And Daniel Whitmore lies at the center of that shift, no longer suspended between absence and presence, but moving, slowly, steadily, toward awareness. Each breath less borrowed, each response more his own. The machines still hum, still guide, still hold their place, but they no longer lead. They follow, adjusting to him instead of defining him, and the doctors recognize this change not as an end, but as a responsibility, because what has begun must be protected with the same care that found it. Emily Clark remains close, her posture softer now, her attention no less focused but no longer edged with uncertainty, and she watches Daniel's face as though listening for something deeper than sound. Something that moves beneath the surface before it rises into view. And she notices the faint tension returning to his features, the subtle signs of effort, of awareness trying to form where there was once only stillness. Outside, Rex remains where he has chosen to stay, his body resting but alert, his head lifted just enough to hold the line of sight to the room. And there is a quiet patience in him now that does not ask for change, does not demand it, because he has already felt the shift, already recognized the return, and for him that is enough. The rest is simply time. Inside, one of the doctors leans in again, his voice calm, steady. Daniel, if you can hear me, try to open your eyes again. And the words settle gently, not as a command, but as an invitation repeated, a path offered once more. And for a moment nothing changes, the stillness returning as it has before. But this time it does not feel the same. It feels active, as if something is gathering strength beneath it, preparing. And then the movement comes, slower, heavier, but clearer, Daniel's eyelids lifting just enough to break the line of rest. Not fully open, not focused, but undeniably awake, and the room absorbs the moment. without sound, without reaction, because it is too important to disturb, too fragile to claim too quickly. Emily feels the shift settle deep within her chest, not a surge, not a release, but a grounding, a confirmation that what they have been working toward has crossed into something real, something visible, and she watches as Daniel's eyes flicker again, trying to hold the light, trying to understand it, and though they do not yet focus, do not yet recognize, they are no longer closed, no, longer turned away from the world. Outside, Rex rises once more, his body responding to something that does not need explanation, and he steps closer to the glass, his breath marking it again for a brief moment, and his ears remain forward, his gaze steady, as if he is meeting Daniel at the edge of this return, holding that space until it becomes complete. Inside, the doctors continue with quiet precision, adjusting support further, testing gently, allowing Daniel to carry more of the effort. And each response, each small success, builds upon the last, not dramatically, not with urgency, but with a steady progression that cannot be mistaken for chance. One of the doctors speaks again, softer now, "Stay with us, Daniel." And the words do not fill the room. They settle into it, becoming part of the atmosphere, part of the process, and Daniel's eyes shift slightly, not focused, not fully aware, but responding, following something. And that movement, however small, carries a weight that no measurement can fully capture. Emily glances briefly toward the tattoo on his arm once more, the place where everything began to change, and it no longer feels like coincidence. It feels like a point of connection, a reminder that what is seen is not always what matters most, and that what matters most often begins in silence, in persistence, in the refusal to ignore what is not fit. Outside, Rex lowers himself again, his body settling into a calm that reflects the room beyond the glass. No longer tense, no longer waiting for a signal, but simply present, because the signal has already come and gone, and what remains is the continuation of something that has already begun. Inside, Daniel's eyes remain partially open now, resting between effort and recovery, not yet fully engaged with the world, but no longer separated from it. And the doctors step back slightly, giving space, allowing the process to continue without pressure, without interference, because they understand that this moment, like all the others, cannot be forced, it can only be supported. The light in the room remains soft, the air steady, the quiet hum of the machines constant, and yet everything has changed. Because a man who was once slipping away now rests on the edge of awareness, his presence returning in layers, each one building upon the last, each one bringing him closer to something whole. And in that quiet space, where no one raises their voice and no one claims victory, there is a shared understanding that this return did not belong to one moment, one decision, or one person alone, but to a series of small, persistent truths, each one leading to the next, until the line between loss and life shifted just enough to let him come back. What returns first is not strength, not clarity, but awareness, fragile and uncertain, like someone stepping into a room they do not fully recognize, and Daniel Whitmore rests in that threshold now, his eyes partially open, unfocused but no longer distant, moving slowly as though the world itself has weight he must learn again, and inside the room no one rushes to meet him there, no one overwhelms the moment, because they understand that this kind of return cannot be forced, it must be allowed to unfold at its own pace. The light above him remains soft, steady, unchanged, yet to him it is something new, something unfamiliar after the long absence, and his eyelids shift slightly as if adjusting, as if learning how to hold the brightness without retreating, and the machines beside him continue their quiet rhythm, no longer defining him, only supporting what is already his. Emily Clark stands just to the side, her presence calm, her attention gentle, watching not for dramatic change, but for continuity, for the way one moment leads into the next, and she sees it in the small adjustments of his gaze, the way his eyes attempt to settle, to find a point, to understand where he is. And though there is no recognition yet, no clarity, there is effort, and effort is enough. One of the doctors steps closer, careful not to intrude, his voice low and steady. "Daniel, you are in hospital, you are safe." And the words are simple, grounded, offered not as information alone but as reassurance, a foundation for something that must be rebuilt, and Daniel's eyes shift again, slower this time, as if the sound has reached him, as if the meaning is beginning to form somewhere beyond the surface. Outside, Rex remains at the glass, unmoving except for the slight rise and fall of his breath, his eyes fixed on the figure within the room, and there is a stillness in him that feels intentional, as if he understands that this moment is not about action, not about intervention, but about presence, about being there when the connection is found again. Inside, Daniel's hand moves once more, not as a reflex, not as a fleeting signal, but with intention, his fingers tightening slightly against the sheet, holding, releasing, and Emily notices the change immediately, the difference in quality, the shift from reaction to control, and she steps a fraction closer, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "That is good, Daniel, keep going." And the encouragement is not loud, not urgent, but steady, something to hold on to as he continues to find his way. The doctors exchange brief glances, not of surprise, but of confirmation, because this is what they have been guiding toward, this slow return of control, this quiet rebuilding of connection between mind and body, and they adjust their approach accordingly, reducing support where it is no longer needed, allowing Daniel to carry more of the process himself. Outside, Rex shifts slightly, lowering his head for a moment before lifting it again, his ears forward, his body aligned with the subtle changes he cannot see but clearly senses, and there is a quiet patience in him that mirrors the room beyond the glass. No urgency, no demand, only presence. Inside, Daniel's eyes begin to settle more, the unfocused movement slowing, attempting to fix on shapes, on light, on something that makes sense, and for a brief moment they land on the figure nearest to him. Emily, not with recognition, not yet, but with awareness, and that awareness holds for a second longer than before drifting again, and Emily does not move, does not react. She simply remains where she is, allowing the moment to exist without pressure. The doctor speaks again, softer still. "You have been very ill, but you are getting better." And the words are chosen carefully, not to overwhelm, not to confuse, but to anchor. And Daniel's breathing shifts slightly, a small change, but noticeable, as if the meaning is beginning to reach him, as if something inside is responding not just physically, but cognitively. The room remains quiet, focused, every movement measured, every word deliberate, and time continues to stretch in that gentle way, allowing each small success to build upon the last. And as minutes pass, Daniel's responses grow slightly more consistent, his hand moving again when prompted, his eyes holding their position just a little longer. And though there is still a distance between him and full awareness, that distance is no longer vast, no longer unreachable. Outside, Rex remains where he is, his presence unchanged, his gaze unwavering, and there is a sense that he is waiting not for movement, not for proof, but for something deeper, something that cannot be measured by machines or seen in charts, something that belongs only to the bond he shares with the man inside. Inside, Daniel's eyes drift once more, slower now, more deliberate, and for a fleeting moment they move toward the glass, toward the faint outline beyond it, not focusing, not recognizing, but drawn, and though no one speaks of it, though no one points it out, the moment exists, quiet and real, a thread connecting the two spaces, the room and the corridor, the man and the dog. Emily sees it, or perhaps feels it, and she does not interrupt, does not redirect. She simply allows it to pass, because some connections do not need to be explained. They only need to be given space. And as Daniel's eyes settle once more, resting but not closing, holding the light instead of turning away from it, the room accepts this new state, this fragile awareness that has replaced absence. And in that quiet acceptance, something deeper begins to form, not yet recognition, not yet memory, but the foundation upon which both will return, one moment, one breath, one quiet signal at a time. What returns next is not memory, not yet, but direction, the subtle shift from wandering awareness to something that begins to choose where it rests. And Daniel Whitmore lies within that change, his eyes no longer drifting without anchor but pausing, holding, attempting to understand the shapes that surround him, the soft light above, the quiet figures near him, the steady presence that has not left his side. And though nothing is clear, though nothing is fully formed, there is intent now, and intent carries weight. The room remains still in its discipline, no one rushing forward to meet this moment, no one overwhelming it with sound or movement, because they understand that this stage is fragile in a different way, not at risk of being lost entirely, but at risk of being fractured if pushed too quickly. And so they wait, they watch, they allow Daniel to come forward at his own pace. Emily Clark stands where she has been, her presence calm, her gaze steady, and she sees the difference in his eyes, the way they linger now, the way they search not randomly but with purpose, and she speaks softly. "Daniel, you are safe. You are in hospital." Her voice gentle, grounded, offering the same simple truth as before, and this time something changes, not dramatically, not visibly to anyone else, but in the way Daniel's gaze holds just a fraction longer, as if the words are beginning to reach somewhere deeper, somewhere that recognizes safety even if it cannot yet name it. Outside, Rex remains by the glass, his body quiet, his breathing steady, and there is something in the stillness of him that feels like understanding, as if he senses that the distance between them is no longer as wide, that something within the man he knows is moving closer to the surface, and he does not move, does not shift, because presence is enough. It has always been enough. Inside, Daniel's hand moves again, not with uncertainty, but with a small, controlled effort, his fingers curling slightly against the sheet and holding there for a moment before releasing. And one of the doctors nods quietly, observing the progression. "Good. That is consistent," he says, not loudly, not as praise, but as confirmation, and the room absorbs it in the same quiet way it has absorbed every other step forward, because each one matters, each one builds. Emily takes a small step closer, not intruding, only aligning herself with his line of sight, and for a brief moment, Daniel's eyes find her again, not fully, not with recognition, but with a steadiness that was not there before, and she holds that moment without speaking, without breaking it, because some connections form best in silence. The doctor speaks again, carefully. "Daniel, can you hear me?" And the question hangs in the air, simple, direct, and for a moment there is no response, the stillness returning as it has before. But then, slowly, Daniel's fingers move again, a slight tightening, a faint but deliberate response, and the meaning settles into the room without needing to be spoken, because it is understood, because it is enough. Outside, Rex shifts slightly, his ears lifting, his posture sharpening just enough to reflect the change, and he steps closer to the glass once more, his nose almost touching it, as if closing the space between them in the only way he can. And there is no sound from him, no bark, no whine, only the quiet presence that has carried him through every moment of this. Inside, the doctors adjust their approach again, their movements guided by what Daniel is now able to do, reducing support further, allowing him to take more of the effort, and each adjustment is followed by careful observation, ensuring that what has been gained is not lost, that the progress continues, steady and controlled. Emily glances briefly toward the tattoo on his arm once more, the place where everything began to turn, and she feels the quiet weight of that moment. Again, the understanding that something so small, so easily overlooked, carried the beginning of all of this, and she does not dwell on it, does not need to, because it has already done its work. Inside, Daniel's eyes move again, slower now, more deliberate, and this time they linger longer, settling on the shapes around him, the light, the figures, the edges of the room, and though recognition has not yet formed, there is awareness, there is presence, and that presence continues to grow. The doctor speaks once more, his voice calm, steady. "You are doing well, Daniel, keep with us." And the words settle gently, becoming part of the rhythm of the room, part of the process that is guiding him. Back, outside, Rex lowers himself slowly to the floor again, his body relaxed but alert, his gaze never leaving the room. And there is a quiet sense that what he has been waiting for is no longer ahead. It is already happening, unfolding step by step, breath by breath. Inside, the room remains as it has been, quiet, focused, deliberate, and yet everything within it has changed. Because the man who once lay beyond reach is now present, responding, aware in fragments that are slowly forming into something whole, and those fragments, though small, carry the weight of a life returning, not in a single moment, but in a series of quiet, persistent steps that no one in the room will ever mistake for anything less than extraordinary. It does not end with a dramatic moment, no sudden rise, no loud declaration, because some stories do not need noise to be complete. They end in something quieter, something steadier, something that lingers long after the moment itself has passed. And Daniel Whitmore lies within that quiet now, no longer at the edge of absence, no longer returning in fragments, but present, fully within the room, his eyes open, not searching aimlessly but holding, recognizing shapes, light, movement, and slowly, carefully, beginning to recognize meaning. The machines beside him remain, their steady rhythm now a background rather than a guide, and the doctors step back slightly, their work shifting from intervention to observation, from urgency to care, because the line has been crossed, the return has been made, and what remains is the gentle process of rebuilding what was nearly lost. Emily Clark stands near the bed, her posture relaxed in a way it has not been before, her attention still present but no longer strained, and she watches as Daniel's gaze moves again, slower now, more deliberate, settling on her for a moment, not with confusion this time, but with a faint trace of awareness, the beginning of recognition, and she offers a small, quiet smile, not to force the moment, not to rush it, but to meet him where he is. "You are safe," she says softly, the same words she has spoken before. And this time they seem to land differently, not just heard but understood in some small, essential way. And Daniel's eyes hold on her a fraction longer before drifting again, not lost, just adjusting, learning, returning. Outside, Rex remains by the glass, his body still, his gaze unwavering. And though he cannot see clearly what has changed within the room, he knows, in the way he has always known, that the distance between them has closed, that the man he has been waiting for is no longer somewhere beyond reach, but here, present, alive, and his posture softens just slightly, the tension that once held him easing into something calmer, something complete. The door opens quietly, and for the first time, no one stops him, no one holds him back, because there is no longer a need, and Rex steps forward, slow, deliberate, his paws silent against the floor, his eyes never leaving Daniel, and the room does not interrupt this, does not question it, because some moments do not belong to protocol, they belong to something else entirely. He reaches the side of the bed and pauses, not jumping, not rushing, simply standing there, close enough now to see clearly, to confirm what he already knows, and Daniel's eyes shift once more, drawn by movement, by presence, and this time they settle, not briefly, not uncertainly, but with a steadiness that has not been there before, and though his expression is still soft with recovery, still marked by the distance he has traveled, there is something in his gaze that recognizes, not fully, not in words, but in feeling. Rex does not bark, does not make a sound. He simply lowers his head slightly, his ears forward, his body calm, and stands there, present, as he has been from the beginning, and Daniel's hand moves again, slowly, deliberately, lifting just enough to close the small distance between them, his fingers brushing against the fur that has been waiting, and the contact is light, fragile, but real. No one speaks, no one moves, because the moment does not need anything added to it. It exists fully on its own, complete in its quietness, and in that touch something settles, something that cannot be measured or explained, something that belongs only to them. The room remains still, the light soft, the machine steady, and outside the world continues as it always does, unaware of the small miracle that has unfolded here, unaware that a life once slipping away has been returned not by force, not by certainty, but by a series of quiet truths, each one leading to the next. Emily watches from where she stands, her expression calm, her understanding deeper than before, and she glances once more at the tattoo on Daniel's arm, the place where everything began, and she does not need to say anything, does not need to explain, because the story has already told itself. Daniel's hand remains resting lightly against Rex, his eyes no longer drifting, no longer searching, but holding, present, aware, and though there is still distance to travel, still recovery ahead, the hardest part has already passed. The return has already been made. And in that quiet space, where no one claims credit and no one seeks recognition, there is only the simple truth of what has happened, that sometimes the answer is not found in what we know, but in what we are willing to notice, that sometimes the smallest signal carries the greatest meaning, and that sometimes, when everything else fails, it is not a voice or a machine that brings someone back, but a presence that refuses.